When people say they hate politics, right, mostly that's a cop-out to not understand what politics is about. Because if you're interested in sort of exciting debate about things that affect the world, that has aspects of a horse race sometimes, that has a competitive nature, which I think most people like, you would love politics, right? But here we're about to get into just sort of nonsense that we know will ultimately resolve itself in some way with a meeting or not a meeting. But here's a story about a non-meeting with both sides trying to spin it. What we're looking at here is a possibility that the government will shut down, I think by the end of next week. Is that correct? Everybody's understanding? So. It's coming up.
Yeah.
So we need a meeting, an agreement we need to come up with at least a temporary funding mechanism to keep the government going, on the theory that we're not going to get a big budget passed and a big funding mechanism. But in this case, Trump tweeted this morning the following. This would be the Trump tweet. Meeting with Chuck and Nancy, which he put in quotes as if to suggest that their names are not Chuck and Nancy, but those are their names.
Normally when you credit someone together, you have to use an ampersand.
Is that right?
That is for the SAG rules and the WGA rules.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird that Trump not following union rules. Meeting with Chuck and Nancy, otherwise known as Chuck and Nancy, today about keeping government open and working. Problem is, they want illegal immigrants flooding into our country, unchecked, are weak on crime, and want to substantially super loud raise taxes. Oh, sorry, raise taxes.
Right, you must emphasize raise more, for it is in all caps.
So
but don't underemphasize.
Country crime, raise taxes.
Yes,
I don't see a deal. So again, I mean, if this were the first tweet that he had sent in this manner, that would be shocking. I mean, it's wrong, it is insulting, it's degrading, it is wildly misleading, as if Pelosi and Schumer are advocating a new policy of allowing illegal immigrants to flood into the country. They don't want to raise taxes. I wish they did. I wish they were advocating a plan to raise taxes, to at least at a bare minimum restore taxes to the thriving 90s level of the Clinton administration. But no, what they want to do is prevent you from cutting taxes, which is the problem always when one party advocates cutting taxes, is that then if you're against it, you're against something that in general, without attaching it to anything, every American wants. Yeah. Everybody wants their taxes lowered.
You were talking about people being able to wrap their mind around politics and saying, like, I hate politicians as a cop-out for that. There are things when I look at this interaction between the two that I can wrap my mind around. I can wrap my mind around Trump wanting to go into a meeting with Chuck and Nancy after his previous meeting with Chuck and Nancy, which seemed like he was abandoning the Republicans.
Right.
And he's now in this weird position. He's managed to alienate his base at times by endorsing Luther Strange. And he's been able to alienate the establishment Republicans by going into a meeting with Chuck and Nancy. It seems like he probably was most recently in a room with someone from the Republican establishment and wanted to alienate these two. The other thing I can think of is he's trying to find any and all reason to paint this well if his tax proposal doesn't go through.
That's right, that's right. He wants to blame them.
Yeah, right? Agreed. I think this is kind of postured as a corrective to their previous meeting, which he received a lot of backlash from his base. And kind of also contributing to this narrative that they're obstructionists, right? So then we move away from this meeting, which is about the budget, right, to all of these other issues about raising taxes and being tough on crime, right? So it's a complete distraction that panders to the base and again paints the picture that Dems are being obstructionists.
The Dems being obstructionists is a great notion because, of course, that would remind the president that he has a majority in both houses. So the fact that he has passed 0 pieces of legislation is on the obstructionist Republicans, who are actually obstructionists. In many cases, stuff didn't pass for the right reasons. But in general, that is a party caused by people who want to not pass legislation because they don't think government should do much. They want a small, limited government. So painting the Democrats as obstructionists is rich. What's also interesting about, well, not interesting about it, what is typical about it is that it's Trump at his most Trumpy. Like what he thinks I imagine this is the sort of thing pre-Twitter and pre-presidency that he would do because he fancies himself a skilled negotiator, right? So you sort of belittle the other side, so they come in defensive and have to give you what you want. Again, reason 1,186 of how he does not understand the job that he has. So anyway, the response, I've now talked myself into approving of Chuck Schumer's response a little bit. It's still lame. It's still lame, but I get it. If somebody's going to send a tweet about that in the morning, not going to the meeting is the right thing to do. Here is Chuck Schumer's response to Donald Trump's tweet.
We had hoped to make progress with the administration on these issues in a meeting this afternoon. Unfortunately, this morning, instead of leading, the president tweeted a blatantly inaccurate statement and then concluded, "I don't see a deal." The president said, "I don't see a deal," 3 hours before our meeting, before he heard anything we had to say. Given that the president doesn't see a deal between Democrats in the White House, Leader Pelosi and I believe the best path forward is to continue negotiating with our Republican counterparts in Congress instead. Rather than going to the White House for a show meeting that won't result in an agreement from a president who doesn't see a deal, we've asked Leader McConnell and Speaker Ryan to meet with us this afternoon. If the president, who already earlier this year said, quote, "Our country needs a good shutdown," if the president isn't interested in addressing the difficult year agenda and wants to make the government shut down, we'll work with those Republicans who are interested in funding the government, as we did in April.
That was great. I don't know, man. I wanted to get out of my chair and just cheer.
You did want to get out of your chair and cheer a cadence.
But it's more than just the cadence. You did want to get out of your chair and cheer a cadence. It's right there. You don't have to look down every word. Like, you've got it. And so the problem is that he says Trump's lying, and Trump, of course, is not. They are both lying because they're all just for show. So you want moments that at least seem like reality and that maybe even give you reality, which would be Schumer saying, and I don't understand why politics doesn't quite work this way. Why Schumer goes, "Did you see the Trump's tweet meeting with Chuck and Nancy today about keeping government open? Working problem is that they want illegal immigrants flooding our country unchecked, weak on crime, substantially raise taxes." Why would I meet with a clown who said that? Why would I listen to that and then go into a meeting with him? If the president wants a serious meeting, he knows where we are. We can have a meeting, but I'm not going in like that, and I wouldn't let Nancy Pelosi go. Or I would advise Nancy Pelosi not to go in either. It's this sort of it's this stock response about go in for a show meeting. Well, it's a show meeting, and you're also giving a show statement about the show meeting. It's all for show. You disagree?
Yeah. Well, I think that Trump has a way of setting up issues in a way that it's almost impossible to have the right response. Because I think that response would similarly look ridiculous.
Why would that look ridiculous? It's so honest. Like, why would I go to a meeting with a guy? We're prepared to go into this meeting, and he sends a tweet saying there's no deal done, and he mischaracterizes what we believe. F that guy.
Okay. Well, that is what he says. He says he sent out this tweet. It's ridiculous. Therefore, it's a waste of time.
Some of this is real quick, Brad. I'm sorry. Some of this is style over substance. I think that little speech by Chuck Schumer sends a message of inauthenticity to America and makes it very easy for people to say the thing that bothers me most, that bothered me from the left in the previous election that we had. It was in November of last year. That, hey man, they're just the same. Like, I hate that stuff. I hate it. I hate it with a passion, and I think that people who have an audience are duty bound to inform and not encourage that manner of thinking. But it's hard to do when Chuck Schumer gives you that.
Chuck Schumer's also a grandfather, and I think he has handled a tantrum before. And I would like to see him channel that thing that's easy to wrap your head around, which is a grandfather handling a child who's having a tantrum, which is if Chuck Schumer just says, "Are you done? You wanted me to come in and I thought we were gonna have a conversation."
Sure, okay.
Yeah.
What was that?
Style.
Are you done?
Maybe that's better.
But
they're genuine.
The clown thing is one.
Yeah.
But it feels with Chuck Schumer, and all of these clowns, is that they have. It feels like you're designing a superhero, like your character in like a Dungeons and Dragons type game where you have only so many points to assign skill-wise. And you have like, with Trump, his communication skill is like through the roof. His ability to like get his message through the din, is through the roof, but his intelligence is way down here. Chuck Schumer, it's like he needs to dial up that communication lever to assign some of his points. I don't know where all his points are. I mean, maybe he's a master behind the scenes tactician, but he definitely cannot communicate in an authentic way, that the way that everyone not only wants him to, but needs him to at this moment.
I guess what we have to remember is that these statements, at least, well, Trump's is for America, Trump's is for his base, and Trump's is an excellent point by both of you guys to remind everybody that this was an effort to get past the last beating he took from Republicans for making a deal with Chuck and Nancy, and he initially was like, "Hey, this was great. They came in. We got something done." Right. So there's that. But their response is not really for us. Their response is for Washington.
Right.
Okay. Chuck is talking to other Democrats, and Chuck is talking to the media, and Chuck is setting up a manner of how this is going to play out, and of not backing down to Trump. So I get that. It is just frustrating to me continually not get, it seems to me, the very thing that caused a candidate, not like Bernie Sanders, but Bernie Sanders, to break through, a degree and Trump, a degree of plain spoken authenticity, which I would take advantage of again and again and again in these situations, which these guys, first of all, stop saying the words leader Pelosi. It does sound super communist to me.
Yeah,
Every
really
time
does.
I hear it, I hate it.
It does, like Star Wars and communists at the same time. Leader Pelosi met with Chancellor Valorum this morning.
Hilarious.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders responded to this as she is so capable of. Here's what Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the president's spokesman, said. The president's invitation to the Democratic leaders still stands, and he encourages them to put aside their pettiness, stop the political grandstanding, show up and get to work. Stop the political grandstanding. You open the day with a tweet with a bunch of capital letters. You know, I mean, you were the ultimate political grandstander.
Yeah, and then the meeting that followed, right, with the empty seats, that's political pettiness. Like the theatrics, all of that is ridiculous. And if anything, it shows his complete inability to take something that he presents as so serious, not seriously.
But but you make a great point, in that so they have the meeting and they have the empty seats in the meeting, and this is where you got to be careful. Like I'm not 100% sure that the Democrats are going to win that battle with those empty seats. So far, every shutdown they've won. They are standing on a much more significant principle here, a tax plan that has been pretty accurately portrayed as being massively top-heavy, and not just top-heavy in that it will reduce the inflow of cash into the government while giving a tax break to the richest Americans, but it will actually put a tax burden on the poorest Americans and middle-class Americans. But you know, again, those things aren't set in stone yet as far as the message that people are getting, and so we are in a world of theatrics, which is why I began this with saying this is. Ultimately, they're either going to make a deal or not. The story is going to be, did they make a deal or not? And what does that mean? Here, we're in the part about who's going to look best if no deal is made.
This and this is the only thing politicians have to do anymore. The only thing you have to do is fund the government.
Oh, right, fund the government.
That's it. Like, can we identify one more thing that you absolutely have to do? Because everything else can be a punt down the road. Now we're getting into, with the tax bill, this weird feeling that we need to do something, don't we? But they don't really have to pass this tax bill. There's people who are holding out. But the only thing you have to do is pass the continuing resolution to fund the government. And it always gets this dramatic, this close to it. And it's super frustrating. And even if you feel like you're winning certain points along the way in this discussion, we're like, some people think this is exactly the tax bill discussion, and it's really difficult to later on down the line figure out what the hell this meeting was.
The details of the tax bill, that's what matters, not this stuff, right? The detail, it doesn't matter that Donald Trump's a racist, or at a bare minimum, a race baiter, right? Any reasonable person has to, at a minimum, accept that he panders to racists. And so when he calls Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas in front of literally the people who
her dad, he thinks that's her dad.
Right.
He thinks that's Pocahontas' father.
In front of people whose sacrifice we should all be amazed by and ashamed that we asked them to make that sacrifice, right? Of the members of the Navajo Nation, who had every right to say, we're not going to fight in your war. You have any idea what you've done to us, right? We're not in many states allowed to vote. But I'm falling into it too. That's exciting to talk about. What matters is that Elizabeth Warren, and her intellectual brainchild, the Consumer Protection Board, right? Consumer Financial Protection Board, that matters. That might be the strongest piece of legislation, strongest act that we have come up with that followed the financial crisis. That might mean more to regular Americans than Dodd-Frank, right? Which was, depending on who you ask, on the left, significantly watered down, or crazy people on the right, too tough, right? Nobody reasonable thinks it was too tough. But the Consumer Financial Protection Board, that matters. And instead of having a legitimate big debate about that board, about the Consumer Financial Protection Board, we get into a debate that Donald Trump is comfortable having. Am I racist?
Yeah.
He's comfortable with that.
You just watched the video by the Young Turks, home of the revolution. If you'd like to get a lot more than that, get the full show by becoming a member. tytnetwork.com/join.